Hello and welcome everybody to this exciting webinar we have lined up for you today regarding SAP Predictive Analytics. My name is Christophe Robbins. I'm the Area Manager Flanders for Micropole Belgium. And with me today is Nick Verhoeven, who is the BI Predictive Solution Advisor for SAP. Together we will be taking you through the capabilities of SAP Predictive Analytics in combination with SAP Lumira for the visualization aspect. Nick will be taking us through a typical use case that can be applied to virtually any organization. Obviously during the presentation you are free to ask questions on the chat. After the session, we will have a short time period to handle some questions normally. If we do not have the time to take up the questions, we will be contacting you personally after the web conference. I won't be holding you for too much longer, and I will quickly pass the word on to Nick Verhoeven, who will be taking us through the webinar. Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christophe. Great to be here together with Micropole, and I'll be taking care of the first part of today's webinar. So being first explaining the analytic solutions from SAP, so the entire portfolio, because looking at the audience, there's quite a few people in there that already know some of the, for example, BI capabilities of SAP, but not as much about the predictive solutions. And I just want to give you a little overview of how the predictive solutions fit in if you look at our BI capabilities and also our agile visualization capabilities with Lumira. So just give you a quick overview. And from this, I'll move on to a quick scenario in which I'll show you our exploratory analysis tool, SAP Lumira, and how the workflow could flow over into our predictive tool, being automated analytics, which I will show you using a scenario related to HR. From this point on, I will give the word to Christophe again, who will show you a few use cases of Micropole implementing predictive analytics and attaining value there. And then finally, he'll speak about what Micropole does in the equation SAP, Predictive Analytics, and Micropole, and how Micropole is able to add value there. So starting with the analytic solutions from SAP. On the top left, you see Agile Visualization, so the exploratory analysis tool SAP Lumira. You'll get to see today as well. And on the top right, you have Advanced Analytics, being our predictive analytics tools and what is the main subject of today. If we look at the bottom, is the much more known solution from SAP, so our BI platform, the way we can spread information across the enterprise in a relatively simple, safe and trusted manner. And this all combines perfectly looking at the puzzle. So if you use them together, it adds power to each other. But what I'd like to also emphasize here is the fact that you can use them individually as well. So how do they work together? Well, to show how they work together, I usually use the analytics maturity curve. All of the solutions that have to do with analytics start with data. You have raw data, you clean that data, and then you can start doing some analytics. Usually what happens is people want to know first, looking backwards, what has happened in the past. So your standard reporting, some ad hoc reporting, and then even partially some self-service BI where possible, but prepared by IT. And what is new, and what will I show you today, is our exploratory analysis tool, which gives you the power to give your end user an autonomous way to interact with data and to figure out why did certain things happen in the business. And sometimes that's just not enough. Sometimes you need to take that one step further to figure out what is going to happen next. And that is the question, what will happen in my business? And this is a predictive modeling question. And in the past, this has been the realm of the data scientist, and there was no way an analyst could get started in this due to the complexity that is involved with predictive modeling. And what I'd like to show you today is how this has changed with our solution. But to do so, I will open up a scenario here. And the scenario is me being an analyst at a company. And I do the standard thing we do every month or so, and I look at our employee data set and I see who has left, and I try to figure out why these people have left our company. So figuring out attrition rate and what is influencing it. So what you do in an exploratory analysis tool is you gather data from a variety of sources, you put that in one data set that you want to analyze, and you gather insights out of that, and from that point on you might have new questions that arise. So what I'll do now is I'll open up Lumira, and in Lumira I will gather this data set. There's already one final data set for the sake of a short demo, and then I will analyze this data set on HR attrition rate. So I have some explanatory variables explaining the target. Did someone leave the job, yes or no? As well as some identifying variables like an employee ID. So you can see how many people have left and what is influencing it. So without any further ado, let me hide myself here and open up Lumira. So what you see here is our Lumira 128 with the latest and greatest that's happening in Lumira. To the left you can see where you can store the document, also the BI platform if you'd wish. But what we'll do now is create a new document. You see all the sources you could connect and mix up in Lumira. But in this simple example, let's open up the dataset I just described. So on the left we have the identifying variables, so employee ID and employee name. And in the middle we have a lot of explanatory variables, like did this employee enjoy education, what kind of hours do they work many hours, little hours, their marital status, and at the end we have the target variable, so what we want to research now, did this person leave their job being a 1 or no, being a 0. So as I click create, the data gets loaded into Lumira. I see the data in the middle. I can click facet view, so I see how the data is distributed. So I only see the distinct values. And what I'll do to start my analysis, I'll create a measure out of employee ID. So I can measure how many people have left their job. People can only leave their job once, so let's make this a distinct count. And go to the Visualize tab to analyze. So what I'll simply do is I'll drag and drop employee ID into the measure and leaving the job as a color. So I can see there's 3,100 people that still have their job in this data set and 300 that have left their job. Let's change this into a table and add a calculation here of a percentage so I can see how much this is percentage wise. And what I see, it's almost 10%. 9% of the people have left their job. So that's something worth analyzing. That's a big number. So I drag in employee ID again, and if they've left their job, but also the working hours. See if that has any influence here. Filter on the people that have left their job, so a 1. And if I do a ranking, what I see is that people with more hours, so everything above 40, has a higher tendency to leave their job. So that's quite interesting. So what you do in Lumira is you create a bunch of visualizations and then drag and drop that back into a dashboard to communicate this to your employees. And that's how you get new insights, and you can share these insights. But I'm happy with this information now because I think we already found something quite important. And this is what you'd be sending back to your manager. So what I found here is that the attrition rate is quite high, being at 9%. And when I discussed this with my manager, he was not happy. And with this 9%, he was telling me that the average cost of an employee leaving the company is estimated at 60K. So that's a big cost, especially if we have this 9% in place. So what we want to do now is we want to offer a package, let's call it the new direction package, to all of the employees that have a high probability to leave. So we want to predict who is most likely to leave next, and then offer them this package, which is worth 20K. So meaning, if we predict correctly, we save 40K. If we predict wrongfully, we would spend 20K where it's not needed. So we lose 20K. So this is the business case we're looking at today. But to answer this business case, what we need to do is we need to get into the world of predictive modeling. And as I said, this used to be the realm of the data scientist. And that is due to the complexity. So let me go through these 3 steps as it would have been done by a data scientist. And then again, go through these steps, but then how it's done with our tool and how it's become available for an analyst to do such a thing. So first step in doing predictive modeling is to prepare your data. You need to help the algorithms later on when you build a model to understand what kind of data is it they're looking at. So we have that same analytical data set as we saw in Lumira, but you need to figure out what kind of data type is it. Is it a string? Is it an integer? Is it a number? Those kind of things. Does the order of the data matter? So it is a continuous order, nominal order, or ordinal, so does it matter? And also what you need to do is you need to randomize the data in two different data sets. So you can train your model, and then you can validate if it's correct. Once you've done all these steps, and you do this by scripting using a scripting language for statistics like R or Python, for example, and then you move on to building. So what you do is you select the best algorithms for your specific case, and you tweak all those parameters to make sure that you build the most powerful model. Being a powerful model with a high predictive power, so it can explain the target well, and high predictive confidence, so you can apply it to new data without losing that predictive power. And then finally, you can apply the model or embed the model in a certain application. This is very different with our tool, because the bulk of this process is being automated, meaning that preparing the data is mostly done for you. The data types are selected for you. The randomization and the splitting of data is also done for you, and you can move on to building the model. What you do have to do is you have to understand your data. So you need to make sure with those variables, what should I exclude? What doesn't have any predictive power? And you know your data. So you know, for example, in our case, that employee ID doesn't have any predictive power, so it doesn't make sense to include it in the model. The algorithms get selected for you, and the tool creates a few different models and a few different iterations for you. And then you have a simple way of applying this model, once you're happy with it, towards a new data set, or you embed it in an application by exporting the code. Well, I've told you this, but now of course you're curious how this would work, because all these complex steps, you don't have to take them. What does that mean? So to show you this, let me open up our Predictive Analytics tool, and let's get started by preparing the data. So let me hide myself again and open up the tool. So here you have SAP Predictive Analytics in the modeler where we're going to start. And the first thing you'll see is you don't have to select algorithms, you select use cases. So classification for a yes or no question, clustering if you want to make groups out of your data, time series for forecasting. And as we want to figure out, does someone leave their job, yes or no, we go for a classification here. We select the data, so the same data you just saw in Lumira. Cutting strategy is all automated here, so splitting the data. And what we do is we click next. Here what I'll let it do is I'll analyze the first 100 rows, and what it does for me, it names the storage type and the value type for the different variables I have. So you see the storage type and value type being given to the different variables. Let me help the data a little bit here, because I see I have employee ID and I want to use that as a key. So I give it a 1, and the automatically added other key I'll leave out of it. So happy with this, so I click next with all the storage type and value types assigned. Then in the next screen I need to select the target, so for us being leave job, that's what we want to predict. And we're going to exclude some variables, because some variables just don't make sense. And if you know your data, you know what to exclude. So in our case that would be employee ID and employee name. Because if your name is John, does it mean you're more likely to leave the company? And with this I'm happy, and I click next. And in essence what we've done is we've prepared the data using our automated tool without scripting, without any of that stuff. And you can get started by generating a model already from this point on. So the data is split for you, the value types have been assigned for you. All of this has been done for you. Of course, you do need to understand your data in this process. As I generate the model, I'd like to drag your attention to the bottom two tables, being the target frequency or the distribution, so that 9%, but we already knew that. But the bottom two are actually very important. It's your predictive power and predictive confidence. Predictive power meaning from 0 to 1, how well does this model explain the target? So at 0.87, it explains the target quite well, so I'm happy with that. And then maybe even more important, prediction confidence at 0.96. And that's pretty high, and it always needs to be above 0.95, because this means the model can be applied to a new data set. And it's done this by comparing the training and validation data set. And this is a great time saver for you, because what you don't have to do with this is apply the model to a new data set and figure out then that the model doesn't make any sense anymore. And those are the numbers we're going to watch all throughout this working with this tool. So first, let's see how the variables have contributed by building the model. And we see the same thing as we saw in Lumira actually, that working hours per week has a high influence on our target. So clicking that will show us how it works. So the very highest hours of working hours per week have a positive influence, so a positive influence on leaving the job. And that makes sense. As we understand our data, we know that's probably true. Then we can look at the model graph to see this predictive power in a visualization. And you can see the different models that have been built and the model is chosen. So how should you interpret this graph? Well, you have the red line being completely random. So if you approach 50%, you're probably right 50% of the time. And then the difference between the red and the blue line, that's your model. So that's, if you approach 20%, you're already about 70% right. So that's quite impressive. So the difference between blue and red is the lift, and then the green line indicates the perfect model. And with this graph, you can get a quick overview if your model has performed well, or should you add some more data to make the predictive confidence and predictive power better. And this is what building a model looks like in our tool. You go back and forth through this process to make sure that your predictive power and your predictive confidence are on par with what you expected, and to try and get as high as possible. So adding data to make sure that you have more predictive power. But now we're going to apply the model, and what we could do is we could export it to a number of code and then embed it in an application. But what we'll do now is we're going to apply the model to a new data set without the target. So I have the current HR employee data set on my desktop. And then what I want to output, or what I want to generate, is the decision. Should we approach this person, yes or no? And this will help me by popping up a confusion matrix in a few seconds. So I'll show you that in a bit. And what do I want to generate? I want to generate a new direction package data set on my desktop. So apply the model, and what I have here is the Confucius matrix showing the number of true positives I have in my model, the true negatives, false positive, false negatives. And if I put in some numbers over here, it will make sense. So true positive means I've predicted this correctly, and if I predict something correctly, remember, that would save us 40K. So the cost of 60K minus the 20K. But if we predicted wrongfully, it would cost us 20K offering this prediction, this new direction package to someone who wouldn't have left. And if I click maximize profit, you see that the maximum number of gain we could get is if we approach 5.5% of the population, giving us a profit of 1.6 million. If we would have done this randomly, it would have cost us 700K. And the gain with this in total is 2.4 million. So that's pretty big. And we do this by approaching the 5.5% most probable. And if we look at the output of our data set, we can see that everything with decision RR being a 1 is in this 5.5%. So let's filter there, and then you see everything in the 5.5% that is most probable has a 1. So those are the people we should approach for this new direction package. So we've applied the model, we're done, right? No, this is where the fun part starts, and this is where it really becomes interesting. Because you know your business, you're an analyst, and what we try to do now is create a model that will help us reduce attrition rate, and I'll show you in Lumira in a few seconds what you could do with this data. But what we've done before is we've reduced churn at credit card companies to figure out who's most likely to churn next and approach them with a directed marketing campaign. We've increased the conversion rate for marketing departments as well by doing clustering models. So the different groups of people you should approach, they make sense. And if you approach them, they're much more likely to reply, and the conversion rate goes up. But we've also predicted something completely different at a manufacturing company. What is likely to break next? And because we were able to repair whatever is going to break next in that company, the downtime has gone down drastically and the margins have gone up. So that's how you gain value. So the last thing I want to do is just quickly show you what you could do if you get this data set into Lumira and then visualize it. Who's likely to leave next? Who should we offer this new direction package? And give it in a way that's presentable to my boss. So let me hide myself one more time here and open up Lumira again and show you what we can do with this. So create a new document based on what we've just created. All I want is the decision. Does this person leave their job? Yes or no? I create a measure out of employee ID again with a distinct count. And I add the other data set. So the original data set, because I also want the employee name and their organizational unit. So my boss can see who should he approach per organizational unit. So I suggested I create a merge and I go to visualize to create this insight. So I want the people that leave their job or that we should approach, I'm sorry. And then you see 200 people should be approached. By organizational name, you see consulting is the one we should approach most people in. And then if I create a table out of this and add the name, I see the individuals that should be approached. So let's go to the Compose tab, create a nice story out of this, quickly drag and drop. And here you can see how Predictive Analytics helped me with the modeling and Lumira can help me with communicating this back to my boss in an engaging manner. So adding a little title here, the employees for the new direction package, and then I could share this story back on the BI platform. I could do it that way. So preview, this is what I'm happy with, this is what he should be able to use, the individual names. And I could save it to the BI platform. So what I've done here is I tried to reduce attrition rate, and I really hope you enjoyed my scenario right here. That's it from my side, showing the scenario. I'll be online, of course, to answer your questions that you might have in the chat. So I'm happy to look at those, and of course also Christoph. But I'm already taking up too much time, so I hope Christoph is not too angry at me. So I will mute myself here and give all control to Christoph.
Oh, that's fine, Nick. Thank you. So what I think Nick showed here was really a good example of a typical use case that can be applied to pretty much any organization. What we did at Micropole, we have some use cases that are more industry specific. Take the example of SAMSI, which is a French organization that is active in the fast consumer business, fast-moving consumer goods business. And obviously in that business it's important to have a good stock level. And they had some problems with their stock level forecasting, especially near the end of the year. So we implemented, using SAP Predictive Analytics, a forecasting algorithm for their stock level at individual product level, which obviously resulted in some tremendous cost savings for them. So that's one typical use case we have executed. Another one that is also quite compelling, I would say, is the one for GAN, which is a French insurance company. The insurance company business is quite volatile, and the problem that they had is they wanted to forecast the people who would need to have new offers sent to them, like targeted personal campaigns, to make sure that they would retain their business. So we also created exactly the same way, pretty much as Nick was explaining with the HR business case we just saw. We did exactly the same, but then for customers. So the result was also that their customer retention rate went up tremendously, resulting obviously in increased revenues and revenue retention, which is very important in the insurance industry. So those are typical use cases you can apply. I'm sure we have quite a diverse audience, so I'm sure you can think of some use cases that would be very interesting and applicable for your own business. Now, talking quickly about Micropole, I'm not going to take too much time. Currently, we have about 1,100 employees worldwide. The turnover, that's The figure from last year, I think this year we're close to 102, 103 million we will end up with. And we're active in 8 countries already because we just opened up the US. Belgium, of course, being one of them, and in China and some other European countries. So quite a solid, I would say, organization, especially focusing on BI and predictive analytics. If you look at our offering, this is pretty much the heart, I would say, of what Micropole does. With at the center, on this slide we call it big data and data governance. You could also call it data management, whatever you want, which forms the basis of all the other things we do, such as digital transformation, performance management, and process optimization. If you look back at the first slide that Nick presented with the Enterprise BI platform, that pretty much fits in nicely, I would say, with our offering. So we're also very much into that, with predictive analytics fitting into the performance management area of our offering. So if you look at our customer base that we currently have, it's quite a diverse, I would say, customer portfolio we have, with, as you can see, the various industries and the various customers that we have. And pretty much, I think predictive analytics can really mean a big plus, I would say, for all of these industries. So that's pretty much a key message we want to give. We were very happy with predictive analytics. We really believe in it, mainly because of the ease of use. If you compare it to other tools that are out there from the competitors, plus the embedding of the models in operational processes. And actually, Nick, looking at the questions we have incoming, there's one question that I'd like to ask, which we got in, which is how can you actually embed a model in your operational processes, and how can you make predictive analytics really part of your operational processes, which is a question I quite like. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, actually a very good question. I'm glad it popped up because I went over it in the scenario real quick, like you could export it in code and that was it. But just to make that a little bit less abstract, to give you an example, think about a retailer. A retailer wants a model of what a customer is likely to buy and what should be recommended to this customer. So imagine all of the point of sales at a retailer, so all the cashiers, and they can see, hey, this customer bought product A and product B, so he's very likely, so over 80 or over 90%, to buy product C if I do this offer. And every cashier gets to see this by what the customer buys, so that's live data coming in, and the model gets immediately applied, and with that they get to know, hey, this is something should be recommended, and with that you could up your conversion rate, for example. To give a simple example there.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. So I see we're hitting 10:30 on the spot, so that means we actually managed to get it all done in time. What I would like to do is thank everybody for your attention. We have some additional questions that came in, and we will be contacting those people individually. All that leaves me to do is thanking Nick for the very well executed demo and the clear use case that he presented, which really gives a decent overview of the capabilities of SAP Predictive Analytics. And obviously, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or if you want to have a more in-depth conversation about how predictive analytics can help your business. So thanks everybody for your attention, and we'll see you the next time around. Thank you.